Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And when you're praying for me and the Holy Spirit, I'm praying for you too, because I think that when the apostles came out on Pentecost and prayed in tongues, people heard them in their own language. So the Holy Spirit was a spirit of the ears, not only a spirit of the tongues. So I'm hoping whatever I say, the Holy Spirit will make you hear what you're supposed to hear, regardless of what I say. When I was preparing the talk, I actually had 3 talks in mind, and one of them is something that I've been thinking about my whole life, which is a meditation on the Our Father. And the other one was thinking about the necessity of the cross and the beauty of the cross as an instrument, and I had a meditation on that. And then the third one, which is what I chose, is called Crises in the World, Crises in the Church, and Signs of Hope. And I wasn't sure which talk I was going to give, even till last night. And I went to Mass at St. Pat's last night because I was involved in my granddaughter's baptism yesterday morning. So I went to St. Pat's and I said, okay, Lord, you got to tell me, which talk am I supposed to give? You know, because the talk that I'm giving, I find a little bit controversial in places. So I wasn't too sure. So I said, give me a sign. So, and before the Mass begins, they have a guy at St. Pat's that comes up and gives the announcement. And he says, the first thing he says is, this Saturday we're going to have a talk on the crisis in the church. So I said, okay, I'll give that one. Okay, so just as an introduction, there are some people who think the church will survive every attack, and I call that the gates of hell argument. That don't worry about it, the church is going to be fine, whatever happens is going to be okay. But the reality is quite different, and the church can suffer great losses. In the 3rd century, there was Arianism, which was a great divider of Christianity in the early days, and that sapped the church's energy and it slowed down its progress tremendously. Then there was Islam, which was an attack on the faith in about the 6th and 7th century that it started, which came from the Middle East, North Africa, Africa, and many parts of Europe, and they've never recovered. The Reformation was the tearing apart of Europe, and it led to the 30 Years' War and about 11 million deaths due to casualties, famine, and a completely broken church. The Greek Orthodox split has never been resolved. Communism destroyed the Christian culture in Russia. The point is, not everything is recoverable. The monasteries and churches destroyed in England and Scotland during the Reformation have never been rebuilt. The crises in the world impact the church, and the response of the church matters. The first point of crisis that I'd like to address is the sexual revolution in the world. It has been a factor in bringing about family dissolution, divorce, the LGBT onslaught, pornography, awful STDs, and abortion. The main theme seems to be this: all sex is good, therefore do it. If it causes disease, use chemicals. If it causes family problems, provide divorce. Let the state handle the fallout and support the children. If there's a pregnancy, use abortion. 3 million so far in Canada and 55 million in the US since the 70s. The sexual revolution permeates movies, TV, politics, our courts and laws, education, foreign aid, and even international agreements. Canada is giving $650 million this year for the promotion of reproductive rights around the world. Can we really expect to have a free sex, free love, LGBT promotion, and self-assigned genders with no consequences? This is a global crisis. With respect to the sexual revolution in the church has always promoted the normalization of sexual relationships, within the context of family. From the early days in Rome, to the pagans of Europe, to Asia, Africa, the Americas, and as far as the Pacific Islands, all the societies were founded on this cornerstone of Christian teaching. In fact, many peoples and tribes turned to Islam because of the Christian teaching on marriage and sexuality, which they found too hard. Now, today, the mainline Protestant churches are teachings that are almost indistinguishable from the secular norms in society. The Catholic Church, under Pope Paul VI, tried to counter the revolution with Humanae Vitae, his encyclical. But I must say the Catholic people rejected it, as did many bishops, including the Canadian bishops. St. John Paul II gave us the theology of the body, which was a God-given sexuality for body, mind, and spirit, but he was ignored. The Catholic people had already moved on. Now Pope Francis is looking at a wasteland where Catholics have accepted widespread contraception, divorce, homosexuality, and abortion. Francis wrote his encyclical, Amoris Laetitia, in which he promotes all the traditional teachings, but wants them applied with some form of discernment. This can be problematic. For example, I might be able to go to communion if I'm divorced and remarried and live in Argentina, but Bill can't because he lives in Poland. Anne, though divorced, can get communion because she has children with her new husband, but Mary can't because she has no children with her second husband. It's really a cauldron of confusion. The Pope also said, famously, "Who am I to judge?" when asked about the position of the Church on gay marriage. He's called out pro-life people for being fixated on one issue. He castigated a woman for having 7 children after having a C-section. And he gave highest praise to the leading Italian abortionist. These are very confusing signals. The clergy itself succumbed to the sexual revolution. After Vatican II, priests and nuns left their vows and went for marriage. Then there is the ongoing men-on-boy abuse scandal, and it's being handled very badly by the hierarchy. The laity was basically misled or outright lied to. The scandal has cost Canadian dioceses millions, if not billions, and many people have turned away from the Church. It seems that the Vatican ideal of engaging the world has backfired, and the world has engulfed the Church, driving it into confusion and weakening its moral foundations. It's causing severe disagreement amongst cardinals and bishops, and it is the Pope, oftentimes, who seems to be leading the unorthodox role. It is hard to say if it will result in a real schism, but it is a serious crisis. The next crisis I'd like to talk about is the crisis of Islam. Islam is gaining strength in the world, and it's a religion that was based on the very defeat of the Catholic Church. Here are some tenets of Islam that are at odds with our Catholic culture. Its ideas on marriage are misogynist. They allow a man to easily divorce a wife. It can be said it allows for wife beating and polygamy. The Quran teaches that sex slaves are permitted from captured infidel. Islam has a view that war in the name of Islam is a worthy high ideal. This is not the Catholic just war philosophy. Islam, in certain cases, in fact, maybe most cases, only permits Jews and Christians limited rights, and they often have to pay special taxes in Muslim societies. Conversion from Islam is forbidden on pain of death. Christians may not proselytize to Muslims. Churches may only be built under very restrictive rules or not at all. Sharia penal laws are based on primitive punishments. Islam has not established a philosophy of the separation of church and state, and Sharia law must predominate. The Quran teaches a fatalistic attitude, God willing. Sharia provides for different rules than we're used to in regards to evidence, human equality, freedom of thought, freedom of the press, and very limited freedom of religion. Then there are brutal cultural practices such as FGM and honor killings. Then there are other minor cultural differences that could permeate society with unknown effects, their dietary standards, holidays, prayer practices, and so on. Now, I'm sure that most Muslims are trying to be good people, but they are captivated in a bad philosophy and religion. Most Islamic societies today and historically have been ruled by dictators. Many are rife with internal violence, and others are exporting radicalism and violence. In our Western countries, we're acting on fear of losing our trade, fear of being called racist, and fear of Muslim reprisals. We don't want to confront Islam with either our ideas or restraint, and all hell is breaking loose. As a result of this chaos, there's an invasion going on in Europe. For example, they say that France may have an Islamic majority by 2050. Canada's fast-growing Muslim population, like everywhere else, is pushing for special recognition and Sharia laws. Islam has been at war with Christianity since its inception. The Muslims wiped out the Christians in North Africa, the Middle East, and many parts of Africa and Asia. They seem to be now at war with the Hindus and the Buddhists. Of course, Islam has always had its eye on Europe, from taking slaves and engaging in wars of aggression and piracy. And Spain was governed by the Muslims for 700 years. They conquered Turkey, Greece, most of the Balkans, Hungary, and they went as far as Vienna in the late 17th century. The violence that we see today with the radicals is not entirely new. Our current wars and efforts of containment of the violent Muslim countries and extremists are at best temporary and possibly self-defeating solutions. The world is experiencing a revitalized and radical Islam, and this is a crisis. From the point of view of the church, the rise of Islam is causing a certain type of problem, not necessarily restricted to Islam. But the church has always believed in allowing each culture to take the truths of the faith and express them in art, literature, and celebration fitting to their local customs, while maintaining a central orthodox teaching. It is not a free-for-all. The Catholic Church, up to now, has never accepted relativistic thinking that claims that all religions are equal. But now, in an effort to appease the Muslims and bring about a more peaceful coexistence, the Church has started saying things like, we all believe in the same God. There's a lot of good in Islam. It's a religion of peace. It's a great Abrahamic faith, a monotheistic faith. If these are partial truths, they are not the whole truth. Ask any Muslim. They don't believe in the Trinity. De facto, not the same God. They find our story of a crucified and risen Christ an abomination and a lie. By not confronting Islamic ideas, it just emboldens their various forms of jihad. Things have been tried. Pope Benedict gave a lecture on the need to integrate reason and faith, and he implied that Islam needed to develop along this path. This caused widespread outrage in the Muslim world, with some killings and church burnings. Pope Benedict, to his credit, did ask Europe to include traditional Christian heritage in their constitution. He could see that atheism and Islam were both taking real hold, but he was ignored. Pope Francis, for his part, has gone out of his way to be very sensitive to Muslim feelings. But he's also seemed to excuse violent Islamic jihad by claiming excesses by some members of the church is part of every religion. But nowhere do I see the Catholic Church actually putting together a rebuttal of what the tenets of Islam actually are. So what does this say about, this current attitude say about Islam? And what does it tell us about the church teachings on the nature of salvation? Does it mean that Christ is not necessary? Do all religions provide a path to eternal life without the saving act of Christ? Can a person ignore Christ and his church and still be saved by being a good Hindu, Buddhist, Muslim, Jew, or by even being a cafeteria Christian? I'm not saying that other people of other faiths are condemned. I doubt it. But I do know that Jesus asked us to spread the good news and to baptize all nations. It's odd, but the current Pope has actually spoken against proselytizing. He is advised simply to live the faith, and the example will be sufficient. Personally, I'm not convinced. So once again, in this area of crisis, the world's reaction to Islam has infected the church with fear, accommodation, and what seems to be denial of basic Christian truths. Our shepherds are neither warning us, nor protecting us, nor giving us the means to protect ourselves from the well-known, resilient, hostile, and false religion of Islam. Major religious defeats can be expected, and this is a crisis. The third area that I'd like to talk about is the crisis of persecutions. Persecutions around the world. The world cares only about money, pleasure, and power. Societies also develop religious culture to keep our baser instincts in check. But recently we have an anti-religion religion that was developed specifically to destroy Christianity. It was called communism. It resulted in large-scale massacres. For instance, 20 million people were killed or starved in the Soviet Union by famines, wars, and gulags, while Mao's communists killed 60 million with his famines and cultural revolutions. In every case where communism has spread, Christianity has been outlawed, churches destroyed, priests killed or exiled, and Christians have been massacred by the millions, be it in the USSR, Cuba, Yugoslavia, Romania, North Korea, China, Vietnam, Mozambique, or even maybe in Spain during the Civil War. Islam, of course, is also a persecutor of Christians and has reinstated its age-old practice of ethnic cleansing. And that's going on in one way or another, emptying the countries of Christians in Pakistan, Indonesia, Egypt, Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, Iran, Libya, Sudan, and Nigeria. Christians are reviled in street demonstrations in South America, France, Belgium, Britain, the USA, and even Canada. The Popes Benedict and John Paul II were accused of crimes against humanity. Bishops over the world are spat on and accused of hate crimes. Altars are defaced, the Mass is desecrated, churches are burnt to the ground or desecrated all around the world. The pro-abortionists have even depicted the Virgin Mary as a large vagina in marches in the USA, and she was shown having a mock abortion in the middle of a gay pride parade in Argentina. Government grants even support such things as anti-Christian art with crucifixes in bottles of urine, as we know. This type of hate is just the beginning. The Soviet Union did not arise without hostile ground being prepared. In Ontario, we have an open lesbian and adulterous premier dictating morality to Catholic schools. In Quebec, the teaching of the Catholic religion is forbidden as a standalone religion. Newfoundland and Quebec both removed constitutional protection from Catholic schools. In Alberta, Christian schools are put under fire and told what and how to teach regarding LGBT issues. Our Prime Minister said no pro-lifer is welcome in the Liberal Party. It stands to reason that none are welcome in his government. Our Prime Minister was seen leading the gay pride parade in Toronto with a man later convicted as a pedophile. Do you think he would be caught dead leading a Corpus Christi parade? These real and micro persecutions are laying the groundwork for outright religious war and persecution. Sure as night follows day, it's a crisis. The response of the Church to persecutions. The Church has a mixed response to these aggravations and persecutions. After Vatican II, for example, there was an attempt to deal pragmatically with the communists of the Soviet Union and China. The idea was not to aggravate them further, but rather work quietly behind the scenes to improve the lot of Christians. But even some Catholic stalwarts, such as Cardinal Mudzensi of Hungary, were undermined by the Vatican. But John Paul II took on the communists and showed that with his moral courage, he could have a tremendous influence. And as we know, the wall came down and the USSR collapsed. But atheistic socialism continues as a tremendous social force even today. Benedict did not have to deal with the communists, but he did have to deal with the growing menace from radical Islam, and he tried to engage the world with reasoned dialogue. This ended in disaster. Pope Francis has yet to counter the persecutions of Christians by Islam in any robust way. He is still trying to convince us that Islam is peaceful as the genocides and ethnic cleansings continue. Christians in the Muslim world are pleading for help. They seem to be being ignored. This is a great calamity. In our own country, the Church has not only not provided a counterbalance to the microaggressions and persecutions, they've done everything to avoid offending social leaders. They're afraid to take on political issues, like abortion, homosexuality, and so on. Most recently, the bishops of the maritime provinces stated they would provide sacraments for those requesting doctor-induced death. The active laity is left leaderless. Some Catholic bishops in Ontario promoted Justin Trudeau when he was an MP by allowing him to be paid to go into Catholic schools and push his anti-Catholic views. The Church has been bullied by Kathleen Wynne on the sex ed agenda, and gay-straight alliances, thus leaving parents to fight on their own without anyone willing to provide a supportive position to counteract this aggression against Christian people. If Catholics cannot participate in the political process, in government, in developing their own school agenda, in running hospitals as they see fit, or in allowing Catholic doctors and nurses to opt out of the euthanasia and abortion industry, what the heck are our leaders doing? It seems the Church hierarchy issues a statement and then goes into hiding. I don't know why. Is it to protect? Are they trying to protect us? Are they trying to protect a financial situation, a social position? But meanwhile, the laity stream out the doors of the church in droves, and those that remain are harassed in public by the media, by politicians, by business interests. This is a crisis in leadership in the church. Some final thoughts on the crisis. There are a number of false prophets today and new forms of the Antichrist. Under this category, I would put politicians promising earthly paradise, New Age religions, vegetarian and other food obsessions that become a religion, the reinstatement of the old worn-out Eastern religions and practices, body worship, gender ideologies, suicide and suicide cults, new revolutionists like Black Lives Matter, success televangelists, Hollywood and TV moguls promoting violence, sex, lies, and corruption, and then, of course, there's the environmentalism. The church and the false prophets. These false prophets are cultural movements, and the church is not promoting its own communal culture. It has unfortunately accepted the position of its enemies and has receded into promoting a personal religion to be practiced as one sees fit in private or well hidden inside the church on Sunday. In the Catholic Church, there is a crisis in communications, a crisis in leadership and taking action, and a failure to support those on the front line battling these false prophets. And of course, there is a crisis in the basic understanding of the faith by most Catholics. Here's the key to the whole talk right here. Catholicism is a culture of faith. It's the mother of nations, the founder of Europe, the promoter of orthodoxy, the dispenser of sacramental life, the promoter of a sane lifestyle. It is reason inspired by faith. It is the seeker of truth, dispenser of just laws. It is a great provider of charity, shelter for the orphan and the widow. Its mission is to dispel darkness and bring humanity to fullness of life. The Catholic Church is not a minor sect to be tolerated by civil society. It is a counterculture, a culture that challenges the world. If it starts promoting itself as simply one alternative to be tolerated in society amongst many, it is on a death march. I can't leave you there. There are signs of hope. I'm not sure we'll see a Catholic culture in society in our lifetime. When I look around, I don't think I'll see a Catholic culture as a societal culture ever in my lifetime. Probably not my kids. Probably not my grandkids. I don't know. But there are signs of life and rebirth. There are countervailing positive movements in our own country and city. For example, we have the CCO and the NET movements for university students and high schoolers. These are two great Catholic youth movements, and the CCO is now going international. We have the Cursillo movement for men and women to expand their piety, study, and action. Our bishop has promoted the evangelization summits. Many parishes, including this one, are using the Alpha program as a tool of evangelization. Opus Dei is a movement that has been around for about 100 years, and there's a chapter in Ottawa. This movement calls lay people to personal holiness. There's a lot more understanding in our time between Protestants and Catholics, largely as a result of the Catholic Church's ecumenical efforts. And this has borne practical fruit in Ireland and other places. And the general tone between the two communities is highly improved. Communism is largely a spent force, even though some areas remain. The Russian Federation is once again promoting the Orthodox Church. The Catholic Church is working at renewing efforts of reconciliation with the Greek and Russian Orthodox churches. In Africa and India and the Philippines, there has arisen a new Catholic Orthodox movement that is also charismatic and is pushing back against some of the excesses of over-liberalization of theology and over-liberal practices of the faith. There are many new religious orders, such as the Sisters of Charity, formed by Mother Teresa, and in our own diocese, the Companions of the Cross. Of course, there's the charismatic renewal and our prayer meetings, which have as the intent to renew the face of the earth by accepting the work of the Holy Spirit. There are many other prayer movements, including the Divine Mercy prayer movements and others that we know from people who come here. Many bishops and cardinals are fighting to maintain traditional Catholic teachings. The faith is growing in China and in Africa. Many small movements are popping up supporting homeschooling, rights of conscience for medical professionals, and rights of parents in education. There are Christian movies, books, and such being produced. Christians everywhere seem to be drawing closer together. Of course, Mary, the mother of Jesus, appears to be taking on an unprecedented and ever-increasing role as a true prophet to advise, correct, and encourage and counter these false prophets and antichrists. What occurred at Fatima is now going on at multiple sites around the world. Her message seems to be primarily one of prayer, fasting, and holiness. Her messages are often very simply, pray, pray, pray. Many of these positives, you might notice, are by and large actions outside the formal church structure. There's no doubt the world and the church are both in a crisis. It is a crisis pitting bishop against bishop, cardinal against cardinal, and many against the Pope. He seems to be focused himself on rooting out those he calls Pharisees. Finally, there are some things that we can do in the midst of this crisis. In no particular order, I suggest we can continue to pray for the world and the church. We can pray and fast as recommended by Jesus. This is a spiritual war, and our response is first and foremost a spiritual response. We can become informed of Orthodox teaching by using the Catechism as a reference for true Catholic doctrine. We can educate ourselves by reading papal or church documents ourselves. We can look into Catholic teachings regarding other religions, what they believe and how they spread their beliefs. We can educate ourselves on what our politicians are pushing, especially in the areas where there's an anti-Catholic or anti-religious perspective. Today we have every advantage. We can find out the truth from books, sermons, movements in the church, the internet, various political movements that can help us not only form educated opinions and strengthen our faith, but help us take appropriate action. Finally, the church has survived. And what has allowed it to survive? I would say in order of importance, saints, holiness, and orthodoxy. The crises, only a few of which I've related here, are real. Let's not be children in these matters, but follow the example of St. Paul, who by the strength of the Holy Spirit confronted every error, promoted every good, and was joyful in all things. Thank you, and God bless you. Amen.